So yeah, HTML is a kind of standard markup language, hypertext markup language. It stands for hypertext markup language. It is a standard markup language for creating web pages. So it consists of elements, series of elements, which is called HTML elements. I will explain that to you in a minute. So what HTML basically does is it defines the structure of that HTML elements inside the page. So for example, I would like to show you. Let's say we are going into facebook.com. In this page, this is an HTML element. This text is also an HTML element. Let's change it into English. This input field, these buttons, everything is an HTML element inside this page. So what HTML does is it tells the browser that the user want a text box here and a text box here and input text in this area and input text below that. So these and all the things HTML defines. So it's just like basically the skeleton of a website. So it doesn't define how this input box will look. It will not tell the color of the input box or the color of the text here. That kind of stuff, the styling stuff, that HTML does not tell the browser how it looks or how appearance should be rendered while in live. So it actually defines only the structure or skeletal where the elements should be placed or what are the elements present inside the web page. That things only HTML will define. So yeah, HTML is not a programming language. So why I'm saying is that some people believe that HTML is a programming language. Actually, it is not, because it's just a markup language and doesn't do anything a programming languages does. So like for example, in a programming language, you can define a variable and you have functions, you have like pointers, you can have conditionals, you can do something based on conditions, conditional statements, loops. You have this much amount of things inside, stuffs inside in a programming language. You can do that much of lot of things in there, but in HTML you can't do any of the things here. So it's definitely not a programming language, and you cannot hack NASA with HTML. So this is a basic example how an HTML looks. So I sorry, where is VS Code? So yeah, let's create a basic HTML file. So HTML file have an extension .html. As you know, the latest version in HTML available is HTML5. So I'm using VS Code snippets. That's why it's like it's importing all the predefined snippet into it. So the first line is doc type HTML, which tells the browser that it's a HTML document. The next one is HTML. All HTML files begin with this tag, HTML tag. So and it has an attribute language. Attributes are kind of explaining more about the tag. It gives more properties or like defining more characteristics of a particular tag. For example, language equal to, it has a value en, which means English. That means this HTML page will be in English language. So you can have other language for formats here. For example, French, F4, like etc. You can have anything on this. You can also define document direction also from left to right. You use from left to right or right to left. In some Arabic pages, you may see that texts will be from right to left and left to right. So that is also you can define there. So a basic HTML page will contain two sections, head section and a body section. So the head is where all the metadata goes into. So metadata is a data which is not visible to the user. So most of its content will be in the background or used by the search engines. For example, here I have defined the encoding type as UTF-8. So this will be not visible to the user. In the third, sixth line, I have defined the viewport. So this is something related to the layout, how the HTML elements are placed inside the screen. So this is also not like actually viewed by the user. So it is has to something to do with the browser engine, not with the user. So the next one is title. This tag actually where it comes like, so you can see this Facebook hyphen login or sign up, this text, right? So this is the title. So which whatever text you give in between this title tag, it goes to the top, shown you there, here, exactly here. So this is what title does. So you can also have styling inside head and some other contents. Most of the SEO contents will be here. SEO means search engine optimization. So the description and all those stuffs will be put it into head sections, and you can import your style sheets, you can import your JavaScript files, you can import CDNs, etc. inside head. So the next session will be body. Body contains the main content of the website. So for example, here the Facebook, this whole content will be placed inside body. Everything here is wrapped inside body. So at body you can have JavaScript files also, but the rule is you have to place the JavaScript file at the end of the body. So let's say we have, for example, this, let's assume that this is a website. So you have to place your JavaScript at the end of the body, not at the beginning or not at the middle, or at anywhere else. You should place JavaScript files at the end. I explain you that is why. For that we have to know how HTML actually works, what is happening behind it. So I'm just running this file. So yeah, we got that output. So it's that simple. You have to browse the file from the browser, and it renders the thing you have typed, and then it shows the output. So how it works actually. For this, you have to understand some things. First thing is, like, we have typed and stored the code into a hard disk, right? And then we are browsing it in the browser. So the browser gets the file from the hard disk as raw bytes. As you may know, the whatever you save in the hard disk or any kind of storage medium are stored in a way in bytes actually. So nothing much real characters from English are as they shown. It's not stored as it is. They are converted into bytes and then stored into the storage medium. So they get the raw bytes, and then the browser engine converts these raw bytes into characters. So normal English characters, and then the browser engine groups the tokens. Tokens are nothing but building blocks of any programming language. If you are familiar with C++, you may know what token is. In HTML, tokens are nothing but this is a token. For example, this is a token. This is a token. Like a tag is a token kind of. So it identifies a p tag, and it labels this line as a token. So this is a token. The token value is hello world. It interprets it as this way. Next, these tokens are converted into node. So what you mean by node is, it's like a single entity. The tokens are converted to nodes and attached to a tree like structure. That's why the tokens are converted to node. So these, for example, this token will be converted to a node and named as P. So and given a value hello world. Its child is hello world. So and then this node will be attached to DOM tree. So what you meant by DOM tree is like document object model. This is like the basic XML structure, where your all your HTML elements are like present. So every token is converted into a node, is attached to this DOM tree in a hierarchy way. For example, this is how a DOM tree will look. Let's say HTML is a root element. So from that root element, you have two sections, head and body. This head node is attached to HTML. Body and head node will be attached to HTML, and then this head node will have title attached to it or meta attached to it, depending upon what you give. And then if you come to body h1, what you give, in our case we have given p tag, so the p tag will be attached here. So like this, it's like a tree like structure, so it is called document object model. So it's for the case only if there is no CSS involved. It will execute in a linear way. So it goes to DOM and then it goes to render tree. So what if you have a CSS? So when the browser engine encounters a CSS file linked, so how you will link CSS is like using link tag. You have to pass an attribute called rel, which has the value style sheet and your CSS style name. You have to link this. So after that, the CSS contents of that file you enter there will be merged into this file. So if the browser engine finds a CSS file link, then it fetches the CSS file as bytes, and then it converts it into characters, and then into token, and then into node CSS nodes. That CSS nodes will be attached to a separate tree called CSSOM. So this tree is completely different from DOM, document object model. So this tree contains only the properties, appearance properties like styling properties of a HTML element. So these two trees are independent to each other. They don't depend on each other. So the browser engine then combines these two trees, DOM tree and CSS home tree, to give render tree. So whatever you see in the browser, it's based on the render tree. So if the text is here, these things are based on render tree. The browser only renders the thing from the render tree and then displays it. So you have HTML and CSS. This is how the process will be going on. What if you have JavaScript inside? So let's say JavaScript is inside your code. Once, let's say I have, yeah, the DOM process, if it founds a token called script, then it knows that the JavaScript is going to be executed. Then the whole this building process, tree building process will be stopped. Nothing will be running, only the script will be running. Once the script is completed, only after that the DOM process will be resumed. What I'm trying to say, if a JavaScript is encountered while this building process, tree building, DOM building process, then the whole process will be stopped, and then the priority is given to this JavaScript, so that JavaScript is completed. After that only the DOM will be executing, and then the CSS will be building, and the render tree will get the result from render tree at last. So how it affects is, let's have an example here. So I have a p tag hello world, right? Let's see the output. Yeah, it prints hello world. So I'm writing a script in the end. Let's say get element by ID, giving an ID to it. I'm trying to print the value of p, so that inner HTML. Let's try to print it here. Expecting it. Let's go to console. So I've got the value, right? Now let's try. I'm putting this script at the top of the body section. Let's try now. You can clearly see that it shows an error that it can't read properties of a null. What this means is, at that time the process encounters the script, like we command it to get the element which has an ID p tag. At this time there is no p tag is created at the DOM. As you can see, this line is after the script tag, so it doesn't found it can't find a value from the DOM tree that has an IDP tag. That's why it's showing an error. So you should not place a script tag anywhere in the body other than at the end. So it's like a mandatory rule to place the script tag inside this. We will be covering more of JavaScript in like next sessions. Now let's get into more HTML basics. So I'm telling you about HTML elements. What an HTML element is, something that has a closing, opening and a closing tag. So this is an HTML element. This is an HTML element. Everything you see as tags is an HTML element. So here an HTML element can be behaving in a different way based on its title. Like let's say if it's a p tag, it has different set of properties, it has different set of behavior. So it has to it will behave differently like whenever it's used. So like yeah, the h1 tag is different from p, it has different set of properties from p tag. So every tag has a set of own rules and it will behave differently, so to achieve different goals. So yeah, these tags are of kind of two types. One is paired and unpaired tags. Paired tags have paired tags have opening and closing tags, like h1 tag, p tag. You can see that they have the both opening and closing tags. In case of unpaired tags, they doesn't have a closing tag. So for example, you can see here meta tag, it doesn't have a closing tag, it closes here itself. And image tag is an example of that. And hr tag used to define a line. And input tag, these tags are like br tag, line break. So these tags doesn't have a closing tag, that's why it comes under a category called unpaired tags. So the next one I wanted to explain you is attributes. As I mentioned before, attributes, it's kind of giving extra specification about the tag or more details about the tag. So for example, in input, let's say input as an attribute type. So this attribute tells which kind of input does that input field gets. So like here in this example, you can see it is an address, email address or phone number field, right? So the input type value will be email, so that you can enter an email, it validates it. You can't give a string like this inside this tag. So while validating, it will show us an error, it will be used to the developer to like validate these kind of stuff. In password, you can give anything. Like what I'm trying to say is this type tag has some attributes like email, file, hidden image, if you give file, it will become an upload button. So if you give text, you can type in text. If you give number, you can accept only number inside that input field. So it has some other properties like placeholder. Placeholder means the text before you start typing. So the placeholder for this input field is password. Here there is no value inside present here. That's why the placeholder is present. What you give as placeholder will be shown to you if there is no value. So the next thing is name of the input field. And like this, every HTML element has different properties. In case of image, you have source, so you should define the source destination of the image. And then halt property gives you an alternate text for that image. So if in case your image gets broken or your image doesn't load up uh, while opening your website, then this text will be shown to you. So you have width property and height property. So yeah, every HTML element has different kinds of attributes like this. You can use it, you should use it to make HTML more effective. So the next thing is these, you should know there is no necessity that you have to know all the tags that are present in HTML. You have to know certain level of let's say 10 to 15 tags, and you should know them completely. It's more than enough to develop an industry standard website. So I'm going to cover important tags, not all the tags. I'm going to cover only important tags. The first one is div tag. So this div tag is used to create a block inside your page. Let's say div, and I wanted to mention you about this attribute class. What this attribute does is attaches a CSS class to this HTML element. So we will be using this class a lot, and then ID. So this attribute will be used to give a specific identifier for an HTML element. The ID is completely user based. It's on your wish. You can give whatever you want, but good practices is, if you are using ID, you should be giving unique ID for every element, so that you're getting that element easily. If you have same IDs for multiple HTML element, it will become a conflict, and it will show some like render errors in future. So in large scale apps, that should be avoided. So yeah, these two attributes are like super important, and you will be using most of the times. So div tag is creates a block inside your page, for example, and just width of 200 pixels and height of 100 pixels. Importing that class. So let's see the output there. You can see it inserts a block inside. We can style it how it as our desire. So the next tag is I want to tell you guys is the image tag. So it's basically used to insert an image inside the web page. And then the p tag. The p tag stands for paragraph. So if you want to insert paragraphs inside your page, it's better to use p tag. You without p tag also it works. Like you can see, type a random text inside. If you see the output, it just shows this text, but it's not a perfect way to do, and it has some styling issues. When you want to customize the full website using CSS, it will be like some render issues, like position issues, or like you can't fully customize that stuff. So don't use this method. Always use a p tag to put text inside. The next one is heading tag. So headings are most important in sites. So heading tags are like 5 different tags: h1, h2, h3, and it goes on to h5. So what it does is, heading 1 is the largest of all. Heading 2 is slightly lesser than heading 1, and heading 5 is the most smallest of all. It has Totally it has 6 tags. So let's see how it looks like. You can clearly see the difference. So you will be using heading tags based on your wish. Mostly use h1 and h2 to what you can use h1 for main headings and h2 for subheadings and h3 for subheadings inside subheadings. So you can use it that way. Then the most important tag, input. So the input is used to create text field as you see it, or if you want a checkbox, you can create a checkbox inside it, or if you want a button, you can create a button inside it. You can use button inside checkbox. So button using input. In HTML file, this is a deprecated version. You can use input to create button, checkboxes, and many other stuff, but in HTML5 it is a deprecated, so you have to use button tag. You can pass the child here as, let me create a button here. So since I didn't pass the value, it shows an error. You can see both are same, but it's actually deprecated and not a good programming practice. It's like an old kind of old school way. I prefer you to use button tags most of the time. So the next most important tags is list tag. So list tags are basically of two types, unordered list and ordered list. What unordered list does is it actually bullets your list. Ordered list gives numbering to your list. For example, you have to enclose your list elements inside the li tag. You can clearly see that the unordered list makes it bulleting, and in the ordered list it numbers the list. So this is a basic difference between them, nothing much going on there. Next one is span tag. So let's say if you're having a text like here, let's say I want this sample text word to a different color or a different style kind of. So if you like put if you apply CSS styles for this tag, that styling will be applied to the whole string. You cannot specifically apply to the string like to this character, to this that character and all. So what we are going to do is insert a span tag in between and then put these contents inside it. You can apply specific class properties in for that specific text alone. So it actually creates an inline HTML element. So like yeah, let's say you have mm, no color as red. Just change the color to red. So you can say that let's have p tag, multiple p tags for this purpose, but it's not actually work how you think. If you put a p tag against that, adjacent to that, it will be like treating it as a separate line and brings the text to the next line. So achieve these kind of single line things, you will be using span tag. So these are the tags which you will be using mostly throughout your web development practices or development courses. So HTML is for like defining the structure only, the elements only, but not for styling. But you have some styling tags in HTML itself. So some of them are like b tag and strong tag. What it basically does is it bolds the text. You can see it's clearly bold. So it's not much, but it's actually what it does. And if you want the text in italics, then you can use I tag and EM tag. The I tag and EM tag are both similar to each other. They just make the text italics. Uh, the tags you will be using like more is like del and insert tag. These are like different tags you'll be using. Insert. So yeah, del text, and you can see the del text as a strike over on it, the insert text as a underline under it. So this is what these tags do. And two other tags I want to mention is subscript and superscript. Subscript and superscript, I don't want to mention it. Like yeah, just makes the text subscript and superscript, as you can see. So these are the tags which you'll be using like most of the times. These formatting tags you will be using, but not much of the time. But it's good. It is a good to know these tags, like uh, these subscript and superscript tags, capabilities and functionalities will not be will be achieved using CSS, but not efficient as using it in HTML. So it's much easier way to implement that in HTML than writing a CSS for that kind of functionality. So yeah, we have covered HTML as of now. I have covered whole lot of basics in HTML. I hope you understand what HTML is, how it works, and some of the basic tags. If you have any doubts till this, you can ask. Since I'm going to jump to CSS and going to more deep in CSS. Any doubts, anyone? So yeah, I guess no one has doubts. Yeah. Let's move on to CSS then. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. So CSS defines the looks of an HTML element, the outer appearance of an HTML element, the position of an HTML element inside a web page, the color, the font size, the width, the font weight, etc. You basically define how the element should look in your website. So without CSS, HTML is kind of an ugly thing. It does have nothing but, like you can see here, it's a monotonous HTML elements here without styling. So let's create CSS for this thing. What a CSS file have is the syntax, the basic syntax of the CSS file is this part is a selector part, and within the curly braces you have to define the properties of that specific HTML element. The selector tells you which HTML element is selected, or if it is a class, or if it is an ID, or if it is a pseudo class. So a selector is kind of 5 types. So the first one is simple selectors, and then combinators, pseudo, attribute selectors. Simple selectors have in turn have 3 types. One is class, another one is an ID, and ID that's shit. The last one is class ID, and last one is the tag. So whatever the tag you are going to use, the tag name itself. So the what it does is, if you are using a class, you have to put a dot before it, then it becomes a class, and you can use this class in whichever element you want. So let's say I'm having a p tag, like this is a sample text. So I'm defining a class for this para. So I'm waiting is there. Let's say it has a font size 2rem, of size 2rem. So you want this same property to be in multiple p tags throughout your project. Then you should be using class thing. So you can reuse this class in multiple HTML elements. So you can see the font size is applied. I can show you. Let's increase the font weight. Not. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So if you want a specific set of properties to be repeated in your page, then you should be using class. The next one is HTML tag itself. So let's say if you want the p tags throughout your web page to follow these follow this color, let's say color green, then you will be giving the tag you want to apply these properties for, and then the property. What it does is apply these set of properties to all the p tag throughout your document. So you can use it. You can see it changes into green. Say I change this is h1 too, so you can see the difference. You can clearly see the first p tags are turned into green and the last one is in black. So the next property is like ID, using ID. The next selector is using ID. So if you can apply CSS based on the HTML's ID, HTML elements ID. So let's see, I give this first p tag ID called first tag, and then replace this as first tag, and then increase its font size to like 5 You could see like the first element is change, its font size is changed to 5 so how it works is it finds the HTML element with this ID and then apply the specific set of properties to that HTML element. You have two font size for the same element. You can see I have mentioned it has a class para, and then it has an ID first tag. I have declared CSS same CSS property font size and font size for the same p tag. What it does is, how it works is, ID is kind of in the top higher order. So whatever you give under ID is given it prioritized or it given importance. Everything other than ID will be like discarded. So if I give font weight here inside ID, the original font weight of 800 will be discarded, and then this property will be applied. So ID has like higher priority than class or any other thing. So if you are trying to like change something, like try this method. So yeah, the next thing about selecting is, for example, let's say you have an input tag, you are going to define properties for that, say border none. So for that you can select it by giving its type. For example, if the input tag is of type text, then apply these properties. You're telling the browser that it's kind of a conditional based property applying. So if the input tag has a button value, then you can change this value and then you can apply CSS based on that. So what if it is a checkbox, if it is checked, or you can change based on, you can play with it, so you can change the appearance of the input or any other tags based on that value. So it's called attribute selectors. So you will be using these four kinds of selectors. Like the class kind of selector is the most important thing. You should be using this all the time. The ID based selectors will be in some occasional cases. If you want to override some of the CSS properties, you will be using ID. So yeah, you can implement CSS in like 2-3 ways. So the first way is I shown you here, is to link the style sheet by this link tag, and then the properties and the classes will be implemented in your HTML elements. Or else you can give inline CSS. What does it actually means is, you can actually define the CSS for us CSS for an HTML element in line itself. So when prioritizing the properties, this style property will be given more priority. If you can see it, like this text is turned to red. So it has the default color is black. Since you are using the class para, the font say let's change its color to blue. So since you are using para, the text will be of blue color, and then the browser encounters the style tag. So the style tag is given more importance. So the color red will be replaced there. So it has more like higher order preference in browser aspects. So if you're trying to override some class properties, then try going using style tag inside each HTML element, but it's not a best way. You can use it in some of the places, but you should not use it as a like often. So the next thing you can do is the last and final way is using style tag inside it. You can define the whole CSS classes and properties inside this tag. So it should be used when you have like not more than 2 to 3 classes, or like it's a simple and very small website, then you will be using this kind of stuff. So it's, yeah, these are the 3 ways that you can implement CSS in an HTML. So let's move on to some CSS properties, how they work and all. For that, I'm going to build a div of class main. Inside that div, I'm going to have a p tag. Let's say dot main has a width of 500 px and then height of 600 px and a background color of gray. Let's see the output here. So yeah, this is your output. So this is a div. Inside that we have a child p tag which has a value. This is my div. This is by default these things are positioned as relative. There is a property called position. It has 5 values, more than 5 values. Like these 5 are the basic values. This MS page, sticky or kind of based on browser. You have to use this WebKit sticky if you are writing in for Mozilla. This sticky will not be working in Mozilla, so you have to use this WebKit sticky. Absolute, fixed, relative, static, and sticky. So what static does is it's just does not move the tag. It's like make the HTML element fixed in a specific position or a corner or whichever place you want. So fixed also does the same thing. What relative does is it's like placing the HTML elements one below the other in the stack. So let's say it's relative. I have another p tag which is also a relative by default. You don't want to like define relative for every other tags here. By default it's relative only. Say heading. So all these 3 HTML elements are in relative. Let's say I'm going to place this in absolute position. Now it will be getting interesting. You can see that this heading is like placed differently. So what it does is it like removes this it's that HTML particular HTML element from that flow, that relative flow, that stack, and then it's like places it in a separate layer kind of thing. So you can specify the position of that absolute element. You can say left s5rem. You can see it acts, it's like it doesn't affects the actual flow, it doesn't affects any other HTML elements, but it's like it was bring to the front, and then you can apply some HTML stylings or positions, and you can position it accordingly. So it's basically like being the basic definition is like being relative to the adjacent immediate parent. So if you it's being relative to this HTML element. So it's maybe confusing at initially. If you work with it, like you should try some more examples with it, you will understand it quickly. So the next important CSS property that I want you to show is flex and grid. So let's say I have divs like this. Class as yeah. Mm, change it to flex child and the main. Okay. So yeah, let's say you have multiple different elements inside it. 1 2 3 6 elements HTML divs inside a main div. Let's see how it like. Oh, one sec. Mm, have a margin of 1 rem around it. So yeah, we have 6 HTML elements inside the main div. So how it orders is it just breaks the line and brings the element into the next line. So what if you want these elements in a single line? So you can use flex. So what flex does is you can even flex is a very powerful CSS property. You can like use flex to define the layout of anything, but it's kind of a complex. If you understand flex, then it will be a piece of cake. So so flex direction will be of row. Since I want these two in a row wise manner, let's refresh and boom, it's that simple. You can bring all the things in a row wise manner. Flex has many other properties. You can even like justify these things to let's say space evenly. What space evenly does is spaces your HTML element according to your viewport and gives equal space between your HTML elements, which is awesome, right? If you're trying to do let's say make it trying to make it in center, like yeah, it's that simple. It's as cool some other properties, align items and stuff. So with align items you can make it center. If it's make it center based on like the cross axis alignment, non main axis alignment, based on the vertical line. So vertical side it brings that elements in center. So the another CSS property which I which is important is grid. So what grid does is, so let's say, and for example, let's go to amazon.com. You can see it has like 1 2 3 4 divs inside it. Each div has multiple divs inside it. So these kind of complex structures are like built with the grids. You can use you can refer to the sites. This is grid generator. So yeah, this is how grid will look like. You can specify how many columns you want inside, rows you want, and you can, let's say I want this column to be like wait, it's columns 2, columns 2, rows 2. I want this to be, oh, it's like, yeah. If I wanted the first cell to be like occupying more space, then you will be increasing this value, or if you want this thing to occupy more space, you will increase this value. And if you want to know more about grids, please feel free to like try these kind of online generator apps. It's like less confusing and more knowledgeable. You can even also try gaps, row gaps, and kind of stuff. So these kind of layouts are built using grids, and you can also have the code here. So the parent, you will be defining the display as grid, and you will be defining the template for the rows and columns. Template for a rows means like you have two rows, 1 and 2, two with two fractions and one fraction. For columns also, you will be repeating the same thing. And if there any column gap or row gap is present, you will be defining that. And then the grid area, the div you want to apply the grid value, so you will be applying this value there. So this is simple, but I'm not a fan of grids. If you want to implement this kind of complex stuff, then you will be definitely going to use grid structures, not flex. You can also implement these kind of structures inside flex, but it's kind of a complex thing to do. So yeah, let's get into some developing. Say I wanted, so I wanted to show you. Yeah, for this session, my goal is to like develop this page, single page, in using HTML and CSS, no JavaScript involved. And I think the time is over, so I already have the code. So you can see it here. I used the HTML elements which I spoke before I explained, and I wrote the CSS for these things. You can clearly see I used flex. If you want, I'll just upload this in your Teams files, so you can refer to it later. Let's try running this up. Hmm. Copy relative path. As you can see, I just developed this using only HTML, CSS, no JavaScript is involved. So I have created Facebook login page, only this. So you can do wonders with HTML and using CSS, but if you want to implement more functionality kind of stuff, then you will be going to JavaScript, TypeScript and all. So HTML, CSS is kind of very basic stuff. It's used to like make websites like static sites like this and all. So blogs and blogs kind of pages, these kind of pages are like developed using only the HTML and CSS. No JavaScript is involved mostly. So if you want your page to be dynamic, then you will be using JavaScripts and stuff. If you want to, if I want to redirect it into a page, if I want to authenticate like more functionality based things, if you want to do, then JavaScript will be coming into action. So yeah, the code I will be sharing it to you. You can refer it. So any doubts till now? Anyone have any doubts? I think I have taken more time.